Let me set down the music a little bit here. Welcome to the Awam Tibetan Buddhist Institute and our practice today, our class today. And we are going to be digging in deep into some of the things related to Tantra. And so, set some things aside here. We began by taking a deep breath, just relaxing our brain, our body. And then we take refuge, a short refuge prayer. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we are on chapter 14 still, second training in the path of Tantra, which is meditation. And here we're moving into the Inner Yidam Yogas and part of Highest Yoga Tantra. And here we're going to be looking particularly at the generation stage. Now, this is pretty intense in terms of having a lot of information about it. And so we're going to be somewhat limited in how far we get today, but we'll continue again next week. So just a note about Highest Yoga Tantra. It requires at least one Highest Yoga Tantra empowerment. And so if you haven't had that kind of an empowerment, which usually has to be done in person, at least that's the preferred, then there are very limited sources that are available on the web, on internet, online. And so conventionally, one must have a personal connection with the Lama, but I know that that's not always possible. It certainly wasn't for me when I began in Buddhism. And then His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that we need to become 21st century Buddhists. And so with that kind of an assertion, I think we're wide open to the possibility of taking advantage of those things that are available to us. So he has given some online empowerments as a part of that, but they have been posted usually just for a short time. One of my gurus, His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche, has given quite a number of online empowerments fairly regularly, which are saved on YouTube. And so we have created some direct links to some of the more popular and more commonly used ones of those on our website. So if you go to our website and you look at the information that is under the resources and links, you will scroll down just a little way, you'll find links for about 9 different versions of these. And so that becomes very handy, especially for people who are otherwise not able to get it from a person directly. So let us begin. The inner tantras focus more on complex visualizations involving wrathful yidams to better eliminate the more challenging and subtle kinds of obscurations that we experience in our lives. They are usually in union with consorts. They may be naked or wearing bone ornaments and perhaps animal skins and so forth. So it gives that kind of a wrathful context to it. The visualization often includes elaborate mandala loaded with symbolic meaning as well. There's a lot of that here. This is the generation stage of the Highest Yoga Tantra that we'll be looking at today. The generation stage is still a form of shamatha, if you will, single-pointed calm abiding. The level of complexity is increased, taking our skill to a new level. These practices also help prepare us for the completion stage practices, which we'll get to later on. and the path to liberation, as well as for the bardos and rebirth that are associated. Those are included in those particular practices. So in the event that we do not attain liberation in this lifetime or fail to transfer our consciousness to a Buddha Pure Land, such as Amitabha's Dewa Chen, or there's a number of others as well, at the time of death. So part of the tantric version of how we go about achieving liberation is the option, if we haven't completely attained Buddhahood, of going to a place like Dewa Chen and spending our time there without the risk of falling back in a negative way through rebirths. So then the bardos are what Dzogchen Ponlop Rinpoche humorously refers to as Plan B. So here we focus on Plan A, which is attaining liberation for this lifetime. The basic outline of the generation stage practices is the visualization, mantra recitation, dissolution, and meditation. So that very, very simple order in which these are done. There tend to be three lengths of sadhana practice texts for these practices. Now that's kind of a simplification of this because there's many, many more than that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about those. Here we're talking about a fairly long text, often included in an elaborate ganachakra or a tsok as a part of that, primarily used on special occasions and during retreats. These may take several hours even to complete. I've even been involved in ones that took several days to complete. And so there may also be middle-length sadhana. That's more convenient for shorter sessions during, say, a short retreat, like a weekend or something like that. These are often take about an hour to complete, and they're ideal for group practice as a part of that. And often there is a short daily practice sadhana for everyday use. Those are the ones that we use here the most often. These are particularly helpful for householders with limited time for formal practice, especially during the week. So the main practice of Highest Yoga Tantra is to actually become a Buddha. First, you visualize or even pretend, if you will, to be a yidam or Buddha, then you become one. So we move from an impure to a pure state of being. Here we are generating ourselves as the yidam in the form of impure state. In the completion stage, we then engage in practices to transform that impure state into the pure body, speech, and mind, the pure state. So we're going through these stages, and that's part of what we have done, going through the different forms of practices and so forth, going back to the Pali Canon and then going through the Bodhicitta and so forth. All of those are elements as a part of the learning and practice. As a Buddha, you manifest in multiple forms. The primary division is into the three bodies, as it's called, or kayas, of a Buddha. There's the truth body, the Dharmakaya, which represents the ultimate nature of mind. It is not a body per se, but none other than pure awareness, actual clear light, or ultimate bodhicitta. The celestial enjoyment body is the next one, Sambhogakaya. It is a spirit or energy form. It is said to be transparent like a rainbow, or invisible to all but highly realized beings. It may be thought of as something like a daydream or reflection in a window that you're walking by, where you could look through the window as well as see the image on the window itself. So this is the form of the yidams visualized in the Yidam Yoga practices of the path of Tantra. So these are the kind of practices that we are doing. They're at that level within those three bodies. The third one is the form body, the Namanakaya, the physical form body of a Buddha. So this is the form, for example, of Shakyamuni Buddha, who was here physically as a human being. So those are the three. There are some other ones, but those are the three dominant principles in terms of the body related to Buddhism. Many sources articulate these bodies as separate entities. Other sources say that the Buddha has all three of those bodies at the same time, called Swabhavakakaya. And there cannot be one without the other. So there are branches of Buddhism where they say that you can't just be one or the other. You're always going to be all of those at the same time. What happens to be a contradiction can be explained rather simply. The Buddhist terminology, you would say, is not one, nor is it many. Three in this case. It just is. It is beyond conceptualization. So that is also a dominant view in terms of understanding of these different bodies, if you will. So trying to explain the ultimate is like a two-edged sword in a way. It is helpful and very necessary to provide some explanation to help individuals understand and progress in the practice. However, anything that is said has the potential to be taken as real. So we have to be careful about this, creating another obscuration to our true understanding of things. So, as with most attempts at to describe or explain the ultimate, it is usually best just left unsaid. As such, effort only makes it something that it is not. It just kind of complicates it for most of us. And so this becomes much easier to understand and accept with years of experience versus eons or lifetimes, as some branches of Buddhism are said to require. When you visualize the yidam, it is very important that you not view them as an independent existing being, as is done in other religions. They are not gods. They are a manifestation of your mind, like a dream or a reflection in a mirror. More specifically, they are the wisdom that manifests in the form of a yidam, mantra, and mandala. Granted, some view this very literally, so if you're inclined to view these in that way, it may also be beneficial to you. So either way is acceptable as far as I am concerned. I tend to lean toward the advanced view of everything as being something that is in our mind, but others view it differently, and that's fine too, as long as it's helpful to you. So let's talk a little bit about empowerments. I mentioned that we need empowerments for this level of practice, but let's talk a little bit about the Highest Yoga Tantra empowerments. The process begins with an empowerment called Awam, or initiation, from a qualified Lama. These are often provided for outer Yidam yoga practices as well, but here they are generally required for Highest Yoga Tantra, almost always required. As noted just a bit ago, most lamas will only give these empowerments in person. Empowerments involve a special blessing from the Lama, which helps explain the reason for that. So recorded or online empowerments are generally considered inefficient for lamas that follow that. But others, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as I mentioned, are beginning to make exceptions to that. In Bodh India, at his 2017 Ganachakra empowerment, this is the Dalai Lama's, he said, we need to become 21st century Buddhas. and he used the technology, whatever is beneficial. And so he's been very open to doing this kind of thing. On this occasion, the empowerment and teachings were broadcast via the internet in a number of different languages. I think they were doing like 13 different translations live as he was doing that. Not all teachers agree, but at least the door for technology has been opened. The Sanskrit word for empowerment is abhisheka. Abhi means manifest, and sheka means to pour. So following Mipam Rinpoche, the meaning is that the profound ritual of conferring empowerment washes the stains of the disciple's body, speech, and mind in their combination and establishes an extraordinary capacity into the disciple's being. Although there are some exceptions, there are 4 universal empowerments in Highest Yoga Tantra that are embedded within the empowerment of the particular yidam. So they are the vase, secret, wisdom, and word empowerments. We first saw these in Guru Yoga. These vary somewhat with specific yidam, lineage, and so forth, and are usually performed in a symbolic manner. Unfortunately, in the West, too often they are not even explained to the initiates, but are given almost entirely in Tibetan without translation into English or any other language. Although we are seeing more lamas include some explanation, so that's much more helpful to people. Traditionally, the innate requested initiations or empowerments to do a specific practice from a lama, some masters would automatically decline the first request and even the second. To be sure that the initiate was really serious about doing this. I don't know, not my cup of tea, but that does happen. There are stories in the tradition of much more dramatic actions and requirements for initiates before giving their first empowerment into these practices. In the West, public teachings are often include empowerments and no separate request is necessary. In addition, outer Tantra practices are generally permitted without a specific empowerment, although one is always recommended. And so it's very general for people to accept that they can do these practices even without the empowerment. I still lean toward the idea that having an empowerment is a part of the tradition and it helps enrich the practice for us. An empowerment gives permission for the initiate to do the practice. It also provides a blessing in the lineage of the Lama for doing the practice, considered to be a powerful influence on your success with the practice. I think that can be a good influence for people when they receive it in person, but I don't think that it's absolutely necessary. The empowerment includes a highly ritualized ceremony. During the ritual, the initiates view the Lama as the yidam, their words as those of the yidam, and their actions as the activities of the yidam. So they are, when they're doing those practices, when they're giving the empowerments, they are viewed as, and they consider themselves in that context to actually be the particular yidam of the empowerment. So exactly what one is empowered to do by each of these empowerments actually varies. It's not entirely consistent. I have included a fairly generic understanding here, so go through this. Most empowerments begin with opening prayers and a purification ritual in which each initiate is given a small amount of water from a vase into the palm of their cupped left hand. Traditionally, it's the left hand, but people don't seem to follow that very much anymore. The water is taken into the mouth, but not swallowed, at least in some cases, and the remnants of the hand are wiped across the hair and the crown of the head. So you take it in your hand, enter it into your mouth, and then you just wipe across the top of your head. So each initiate then, according to some traditions, follows outdoors follows the others outdoors to expel the water that's still in the mouth. And so they go out and just spit that out and then return back. So in large settings, as you can imagine, it may be instructed or expected to simply swallow the water to facilitate the event. So like the event that I was talking about with the Dalai Lama in India, it had 300,000 people. Imagine what it would be like to try and get 300,000 people to get up, receive it, and then go out and expel it, and then come back to sit down. It would take days. Okay, so first, the vase empowerment is similar to the purification ritual described above here. But the water is or may be poured into your right hand and is swallowed. This purifies all defilements of your bodies and empowers you to do the generation stage practice and plants the seed for attaining the form body Nirmanakaya. So when you take that in, imagine it in that case, if you're not taking it outside, is that you're taking it in and it's going through you, just like the doing it with Vajrasattva, the purification of Vajrasattva, because it's very similar to that. So the second empowerment, although this varies, different rituals and so forth, is called the secret empowerment. It purifies your speech and empowers you to do the mantra recitation, speech, mantra, and plants the seed for attaining the enjoyment body, the Sambhogakaya. So we're going through the four bodies with the four empowerments. It is called secret because in some cases it involved secret initiations with a consort by the Lama into a sexual yoga practice. This secret initiation is now almost always done in just a symbolic way, and usually without even reference to any sexual yogas. Third one is the wisdom empowerment. It purifies your mind. So body, speech, mind. It empowers the initiate to do the completion stage yogas and plants the seed for realization of the truth body, the Dharmakaya. What you're being empowered to do in this one, and sometimes referred to, well, in the next one, the fourth empowerment, varies from one tradition to another. So there's significant differences in some of these. So it's important that you know what is being done as you get those empowerments. The sexual yogas are most commonly done today through visualization practices with a visualized consort, Jnana Mudra. The practices with an actual consort, Karma Mudra, have nearly died out of the tradition, but do remain in a few branches of the tradition, namely Nirmanakaya, where they are considered to be particularly relevant for householders. Other traditions tend to reserve these only for the highest level practitioners, if any at all. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Finally, we have the fourth, or word empowerment. This purifies any remaining subtle obscurations, empowers the initiate to do the non-dual practices of Mahamudra or Dzogchen, and plants the seed for the realization of the essence body, Swabhavakakaya, a non-dual union of the other three kayas. So often described as the three of those coming together into a single entity. At this point, you are said to transcend the use of either the visualized or real consort and rely entirely upon the non-conceptual Mahamudra or Dzogchen, the ultimate transcendent wisdom. Okay, so we're getting to the point where we go beyond having to describe it or anything like that. So there are countless variations to doing these things, to the rituals that are used based on the lineage traditions and different practice texts. The empowerment ceremony may include an oral reading of the text and the collective recitation of the mantra. In some cases, the Lama will also explain the text, although I have my experience that's been fairly rare, and how to do the practice, which is even more rare. Unfortunately, the degree of explanation varies considerably, and the practitioners are sometimes left on their own to figure it out, if an actual practice text sadhana is even provided. In some cases, they will either provide it or they will make it available to you and go out and purchase a copy or something like that. If in doubt, ask your Lama, and they can help you with that. It is fairly common for an empowerment ceremony to include a ganachakra or tsok feast. This involves offerings in addition to sharing food and drink, and may be as simple or very, very elaborate. A plate of food is offered to the yidam, and then the presiding Lama and other ordained Lamas, and then the remaining audience. So it goes through this sequence. It is customary to keep one item from those on your plate as another offering called the remainder, to be collected and set aside for animals, birds, and other beings outside of the area where you are doing the empowerment, if this is part of an empowerment. So don't eat it all, save a little bit to be used for that purpose. At the end of the empowerment ceremony, it is also customary to take a kata, which is usually a long white scarf. I have one here, you've probably seen them before, but this is an example of what they look like. And you take them in your hand, put your hands together, take them and offer them to the Lama once the ceremonial part has been completed. Usually what they will do as a part of that is they will take it from your hands and then they will wrap it around your neck, although sometimes they just take it and set it aside. I've had both of those happen. Another thing that is often a part of that, because that is at the end of the ceremony, and so one of the things that often happened, the timing may vary if there's going to be other teachings and so forth, but oftentimes we make donations to the Lama. Many of the donations the Lamas don't have a job, so they depend on our donations for support. And so usually you don't give that, though, to the Lama directly. There will usually either be someone there collecting it, usually in a plate, or the plate will be set down close to the Lama where you can put your donations there. And most places will have some kind of a small little envelope that you can put it in. So that can be helpful as well as a part of that. So most centers provide those. It is either given to the attendant, as I mentioned, or set on the table or throne, but never given directly to the Lama. It's tradition. Give what you can. It may just be $5 is all you can give, or we've had people give $100. And so whatever you can is fine. And then remember that the teachings on generosity pointed out that doing the practice is the greatest gift of all. So the Lamas, it's more important that you do the practice after receiving an empowerment than it is that they receive money from you. Empowerments often include an additional samaya or vow on the part of the student. If the empowerment is taken as a blessing, it is not necessary to complete this. And I think a lot of people just accept them as a blessing. However, if it is taken as a commitment or a vow to the practice, then there is an expectation that you will do it. This may mean suspending other practices, because it can take a long time to do some of these. And so for a period of time, in order to complete this new commitment, or if you are able, you can add it to part of your other daily practices. Depends on how long they are. Some of these are based upon very, very lengthy texts. Other ones are based on very, very short text. Some of them are like half a page. So really short ones would be very easy to do many, many times. And then the samaya varies from one lama to another. As a part of that, some may require extensive periods of practice, such as a year or even more, and numbers of repetitions of the mantras, such as 1.2 million or more. Others require much less, for example, only 10,000 repetitions, which usually doesn't take all that long. And then still others may only require an even smaller number for students who have already completed commitments for other specific practices. So sometimes if you've already done these with a lama and you've done lots and lots of mantras and they know that, they'll have you do a smaller number. Some lamas say that it doesn't really matter because mantras are actually the same. And so if you've done the mantras for one, you're also doing it for the other. Garchen Rinpoche does that. He says the true samaya is not doing the practice or giving the mantras, but love and devotion for the lama and your dharma brothers and sisters, bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. If it's not clear, be sure to ask. It is said that if you do not fulfill this commitment, it may be harmful to both you and the Lama who gave the empowerment. So please take them seriously, or simply take the empowerment as a blessing, not leading to liberation. There is also an expectation that when you take an empowerment, you will maintain continuity in the practice, or at least in a periodic recitation of the mantras. So sometimes I've had lamas say, okay, you do a certain number of them and then you do another number of them, a smaller number, once a month or something like that, or at least once a year. So the ideal is to recite the mantras during the 4 or 6 sessions that you're doing each day of practice. And then second best is once a week, 4 or so times each month. At the least, it should be done at least once a month. It is recommended it also include offerings from time to time. Short daily practice texts make it easier to meet these expectations. It can be helpful to keep a binder of their empowerments. Now, if you're a serious practitioner, you'll find out that sooner or later you will begin accumulating a lot of different things. And so keeping a binder where you insert the texts or other things that you've received from the Lama can be very helpful as a part of that. Keep a record of the empowerments, the Lama, your commitments, the location. And kind of a summary sheet in the front of the binder can also be helpful for that. And what you have completed, as well as the dates for intermediate practices. And then it can be surprising how fast you can collect these empowerments over just a few years of practice, even, even if that is not your intention. Now, His Holiness Garchen Rinpoche, as well as His Holiness Dalai Lama, have said that all empowerment and yidams are essentially the same. Okay? So that, I think, is very helpful, particularly for those of us practicing in the West, and as householders and so forth, to keep that kind of thing in mind. But it's okay to switch from one to another, but just keeping track that you're making other commitments when you do that. Now, the secret mantra. Tantric practices are sometimes referred to as a secret mantra. Traditionally, these practices were passed down from one to one, from master to disciple. They were not spoken of outside of that relationship. More recently, it has been, many of these works have been
published. They have been described as being self-secret, meaning that only those who have the empowerments and teachings are able to actually read them and have sufficient interest to understand them. Now, some texts are now being released as restricted texts, usually based on the honesty of the buyer's qualification to make the purchase. I remember years ago when you wanted one of those things, you had to send documentation for what you had, where you received it, who the Lama was, and on and on and on in order to receive that. And I think they decided that was getting to be too much of a problem of having to go through and document and validate those things. And so it's gotten much easier. Like I said, usually now it's just mentioned as a restricted text. So the 7th of the 14 root downfalls is revealing secrets of the Tantra to those not ready to understand. So some sources list 4 secrets. One of them is the profound view of Tantra itself. The second is the deep conduct, actions associated with it. The third one is the name and form of the yidam itself, which is easy to find on the internet. That's not such a secret these days. And the signs of accomplishment. How do you know that you have achieved those kind of things, which most general people probably wouldn't take the time to dig into those kind of things anyway. So please respect and honor the teachings. This is a sign of your own accomplishment. So the generation stage, let's talk a little bit more about that. There are numerous tantric practices. The new Sarma schools classify them into 3 categories: father, mother, and non-dual. There is also a uniform agreement in the meaning of these classifications, or no uniform agreement as to the classifications, nor the attribution of tantras to classifications themselves. So different lineages and so forth use those labels, but they use them in different ways. So as outlined in chapter 3 of Innate Happiness, in the Nyingma lineages, tantras are divided into Mahayoga, the generation stage, Ana Yoga, the completion stage, and non-dual, the Dzogchen or Ati Yoga stage. So those are the way that we view those. The content of tantras varies considerably, but there are significant similarities. For the most part, they follow somewhat similar patterns. What follows is the moderately detailed outline of this. There's many, many different variations. Of the key characteristics you are likely to find in these texts. For a more detailed explanation, I recommend the Generation Stage in Buddhist Tantra book by Gyatso Rinpoche. It's very good, goes into a lot of detail, helps explain the terminology and so forth in great detail. Since Dzogchen Tantra practices are generally concise, although there are certain exceptions, this outline may seem to be a bit lengthy compared to the text that we use. And so nevertheless, I believe this is a level of detail is a good background, especially if you encounter more elaborate sadhana practices, such as those provided in appendixes C, D, and F, which we will take a look at later on in this course. So in brief, here are some of the key points. Now, I'm not going to go over all of those that are in the book. I highly encourage you to go through and really look at the details in the book. So I'm going through. This is going to be somewhat of a summary of the ones that are available in the book. So first, there are some general preliminaries. The title, the homage to the Lama or the yidam as a part of that, the commitment. This is the commitment of the writer, the author of the text, not the commitment that we would make as a samaya. Then the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. I usually go through, recite those as a part of it, followed by refuge. And so it may describe the refuge tree, such as we have over here. There's many different ways in which those are painted for different practices and so forth. And then the levels, which generically are outer, inner, secret, and most secret. So they may explain that a little bit in those introductions. And then bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So there's usually a prayer or more for aspiration and action bodhicitta. So the specific preliminaries then include clearing away non-conducive circumstances. So in order to receive this, we need to clear things. And so we do that in a number of different ways, expelling negative and demonic forces. We could make food offerings, for example. And then when they're satisfied, the demons leave. And so that is said to destroy their ego grasping. And then the wheel or circle of protection is often used as a description. So we're protecting the area in which we are doing the practice here. It may include things listed in elaborations in some cases, various Vajra weapons. There's a Vajra fence, a surrounding mass of blazing fire, Vajra water, Vajra wind. Those are kind of classic topics that may be included there. And then establishing the conducive conditions. And so here we have blessings, descent of blessings. And so then the blessing of offering materials. And that may include like Ramyam Kam mantra that radiates from your heart and purifies all of those. Another is broom, which transforms into a vast vessel with Om Hong. The Om refers in this case to the 8 outer offerings. And then is the inner offerings related to body, speech, and mind. And then the Hong are the secret offerings for Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. We won't go through all those details, but there are specifics in the text for these. And then we go through the yoga of meditative equipoise, which is the visualization part of the practice. So we have the yoga of physical mantra, the inner meanings of those, the 3 meditative absorptions or samadhis are included here, associated with the 3 kayas. And then the generating the actual support is a part of this. It includes the celestial mansion. There's a different version of that for peaceful yidams and wrathful ones. And the differences are described in the text. You can go through and look at those. And then there is the actual generation of the seat of the yidam. So usually there's a lotus flower, 1 or 2 different discs and so forth that are a part of that, the sun and the moon discs. And then the generation of the actual yidam itself, him or her. The seed syllable, samadhi sattva, appears in space, descends down to the seat, representing the Buddha's speech as a part of that, and then light radiates out again to bring the Buddhas back in, and then the seed syllable transforms into the yidam or body, so that at our heart essence there, and so then we invoke the wisdom beings, the jnana sattvas, and goes through, again, there's a specific ritual for that part. And then various prostrations, offerings, and praise. Go through those. And then the meditative concentration upon or visualization of the yidam. So this is where we actually begin the meditative process. Once we have completed that, which may involve just meditating, a state of meditation as a part of that, we recite the mantra. And so the mantra comes in the form of different syllables. Sometimes it will be explained, sometimes it won't be explained as a part of that. There's differences in terms of the male and female yidams. And then we recite as many times as you can while maintaining a full visualization during the empowerment itself. They'll tell you when, or they'll say, that's, we'll stop here, kind of thing. But we do however many that we were planning to do with that. And so you have a mala, you can use the mala for counting. And if you are doing multiple malas, it's always handy to have a little clicker so you can keep track of the numbers as a part of that. So recite many times, as many as you can, maintaining this full visualization. You're still visualizing this as you do the recitation. And then the yoga of meditative equipoise, which is a reference to what is called clear light. And so we dissolve the visualization outside in. So we've done the visualization, so now we're removing the visualization. We dissolve the visualization from the outside in. So the outside, then the wheel of protection, the base of elements, the charnel grounds, the palace, the retinas, the yidam and consort, the commitment being, the wisdom being, the mantra, the seed syllable, then from the bottom up into emptiness. And we meditate. And so we rest in that non-conceptual pure awareness, Rigpa, and meditate as long as you can. After that, we come back into our existence being, and oftentimes then is when the ganachakra or tsok feast offerings happen. They're usually optional about doing these. More likely it's during an empowerment that you would encounter these, but some people like to do them when they do it for practice. You can do it very simply, even just taking a little cracker and making an offering of that each day as you do these is one way of doing that. So doing that, and then the actual completion part. Again, we make offerings and praise, and recite prayers as a part of that. Sometimes even the Vajrasattva is at the end of that. It's more often at the beginning, but sometimes I've seen it at both the beginning and the end, requesting forgiveness of any errors that we may have made. And then a dedication of merit. We dedicate the merit usually to, there are a number of beings in the lineage that we do that for. And then we recite other auspicious closing prayers that may be included as a part of that. And then finally we arise as Nirmanakaya form of the yidam abiding in pure awareness. We are the yidam. Okay, at the conclusion, we've received that, we became that, and we still are. So I sometimes refer to this as role play. So you may think, oh, well, I don't feel like I really became that yidam. But you want to go about doing your activities as if you really were one. When you are visualizing things, when you're hearing sounds and so forth, encountering things physically, you want to do it as if you were that yidam. One way to think about it is, what would Buddha do? You could ask yourself that question and think about how to apply that as if you are the Buddha. That, I think, is actually the most important part of these practices. You can sit down and recite mantras and texts and all of that kind of thing, and you can enjoy them. But if you really want to attain liberation, which is the whole idea behind this, then when you go about these daily activities, it's like you fake it till you make it, if you will. So when engaging in the generation stage practices, there are a few hints that may be helpful to you here. The first is to locate a good picture of the yidam. Spend extra time familiarizing yourself with that. I mentioned before, there's lots of pictures available on the internet. It's very easy to print one of those out. or you can get a Tonka painting if you like. That's very helpful. And then do it a little at a time. First start with perhaps the face, and then the entire head and the things that it may have that are a part of that image, and then go down through parts of the body and so forth until you get a very complete image that you can recognize it. If you go into, like if you walked into this room, we have Tonka paintings all the way around here. Now you could go around and you were looking for Padmasambhava. Oh yeah, that's him. It's that kind of thing. You want to be able to recognize it and distinguish it from other ones as a part of that. So you repeat this over and over until you can clearly recall it without even looking at the image. It's in your mind, and you know what it is all the time. And so then we also locate a good picture of the mandala of the yidam. The same kind of a procedure. Memorizations or visualization are too difficult. You may use what's called a flash glance at the picture and then continue to imagine as best you can. So the way that works is you have a picture, you glance at it, and then you go on. And then you glance at it, and every little thing that you do, like if you're doing mantras, every mantra, you do a quick glance at it and then recite the mantra, look at it, recite the mantra, and so forth. So some people just don't have the same kind of visual skills as others do. Our brains are all a little bit different in terms of the organization. And so that is a way that we can do that kind of thing. I also just wanted to show you here some things that you might want to have available for this. This is for the Vajrakalaya Tonka. And so you can see this is what a Tonka might look like for Vajrakalaya. It also includes his consort as a part of it. You can see down toward the bottom, there's the disc, sun and moon disc here, and then the flower leaves are kind of don't exactly look like an ordinary lotus, but they are symbolically represented there. And then there's a lot of symbolism as a part of that as well. Now, another part of this is the seed syllable. So here is a home, which is a very common seed syllable. And so having a copy of that may be helpful. The mandala, here, Vajrakalaya mandala. Oops. You can see, I can move that a little bit closer here, get it a little more straight. And so these vary a little bit. There even are multiple different variations of that for each of the yidams. And so that's different. And here's one just for interest's sake here. This is a 3D version of his mandala. So the painting image is actually intended to be this. There are not a lot of those available, as you can imagine. It's a lot easier to just paint a picture than it is to actually create that kind of an image as a part of that. But those will give you a few ideas about how that can be done. So, next time, we're going to continue next time with this. And we'll be looking more at sadhana practices. We'll look at Vajrakalaya and or Vajravarahi as a part of that. And if we have time, we'll get into the longer version of the one for the white dakini that is in the back of the book as a part of that. And we'll also talk about some of the rituals associated with this, things like the mandala. We talked a little bit about that, the drums, the bells associated with them, the ganachakra or tsok feasts, as well as a smoke offering or puja. So those are going to be on the topic for next time. So please abide softly and deeply with pure awareness, with loving kindness, compassion for all sentient beings, always and always. And pray for peace. Thank you very much.